Hello, I'm Dave Casler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, your guide through the ARRL license manuals. The videos in this course follow the manuals section for section. You can get the ARRL license manuals from the source listed below the video. After you watch the video, dig into the corresponding section of the book, study the associated questions, and then come back for the next video. My hope here is to give you just a little bit of background so that when you go to study the section, it will mean more to you. This one, section 8.2 on identification, is very important. And that's why there's test questions on it that you need to look at. After all, what the FCC gives you is what they want you to identify with, which is your call sign. Now, there are a number of situations in here and how that's done. Now, one of the things that the lesson manual talks about is so-called kerchunking, the repeater, and then not letting anybody else know who did the kerchunking. Now, it says what you do is just hold down the mic and give your call sign. The problem is a lot of repeaters, if it's been more than 10 minutes since they identified, will put their identification right on the top of your voice. So you might kerchunk it, and if you get nothing back, then identify. This is KE0OG testing, or whatever you want to do. Now, lots of times you'll kerchunk it, the repeater hasn't been used for a while, it will come in with its Morse code call sign. As soon as it finishes, then you can transmit. This is KE0OG listening, which is the 2-meter way of saying CQ. Okay, so the rule for identifying is easy and a little counterintuitive. You have to identify every 10 minutes and at the end of your conversation with somebody else. Now, that happens to mean that you don't need to identify yourself until you've been on the air for 10 minutes. So what is normal is that people call each other with their call signs, and if they happen to have a conversation that goes on for more than 10 minutes, they need once every 10 minutes to say, "This is KE0OG, back to you," and then the other person can give their call sign. You're not required to give the other person's call sign, just your own, but it is a matter of courtesy usually to let people know who they're talking to give your call sign more frequently, and certainly at the end of your call sign. The FCC recommends using phonetics. You can find the phonetic alphabet. For example, KE0OG would be Kilo, Echo, 0, Oscar, Golf. And that's using standard phonetics. There's all kinds of phonetics that you can do. I would not recommend using them if there's a lot of noise on the channel, but sometimes I call myself King Edward 0, Old Grouch. So you can do tactical call signs. The purpose for a tactical call sign is that when you call that sign, there will be a ham there. It might be a different ham every time, but it's at the place that you're calling. For example, I help provide communications as part of the Montrose Amateur Radio Club effort for a long foot race that's done in the mountains near here called the Hard Rock 100. And I'm usually at Ouray. So if somebody wants to talk to the Ouray station, they say, "Ouray, this is Camp Bird." Okay, so I'll answer and say, "This is Ouray," and then you pass whatever you need to do, and then I identify, "This is KE0OG at Ouray." You have to give your actual call sign even though you're using tactical call signs. Now, the beauty of tactical call signs is if I go home and some other ham comes in, you can still say, "Ouray, this is Camp Bird," and another ham will pick it up and go from there. You still need to put in your own call sign there. There's a provision in the regulations for what they call suffixes. For example, a lot of people when they're on ships will give their call sign /MM, Maritime Mobile. Okay, some people will say this is KE0OG Mobile. Now, where it really comes in handy is where you're doing things like packet radio. For example, if someone wants to call me on my packet radio, they would have to address KE0OG-1. Now, if they went to KE0OG-2, they would get my mailbox. If they do KE0OG-5, that's my APRS station. So you can put these suffixes on so that you can kind of keep track of what they're doing. Now, here, this is important. When you're testing, which you will have to do from time to time, be sure to identify yourself. Just today I was on 17 meters doing some testing, and a guy came on and says, "Do you know you're right on top of a QSO?" And I apologized and gave my call sign and moved. Okay, got out of the way. But I gave my call sign. It's, in my opinion, a cowardly thing to do to not let people know who you are when you're doing something that might interfere with other people. You know, be brave, use your own call sign. Nearly all hams are very forgiving. This guy didn't berate me or anything. I just said, very sorry, didn't hear them, and moved. Because it is possible on HF for an amateur that you can hear can also hear somebody else that you can't hear. So that does happen. One thing that you could do is come on and say, is this frequency in use? You may or may not get a response. Sometimes people will come right back. I've had instances where nobody responded. I started to use the frequency and somebody jumped in and said the frequency was in use. Okay, I can handle that. And that's really about all there is to it. It's rules and regs kind of stuff, so study it. Check out those test questions. These are things that you need to just understand. Now, when you become a ham, you don't have to have all of it memorized. You can always look these things up, but you won't be able to during the test. So you've got to understand these things and get all the little different variations in there. Most of the time it's just you and your radio. You use your call sign.
Thanks for following along with the videos and the book. After you've studied this section in the manual and are satisfied you understand the questions and their answers, come back here for the next video. The ARRL is the National Association for Amateur Radio, and I urge you to join, even if you don't have your license yet. That way you get QST, the League's monthly magazine full of articles for beginners and veterans alike, or you can choose On the Air, a magazine designed specifically for those new to amateur radio. Until we next meet, 73.